What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? A dangerous amount of coffee and a ton of grit. My name is Jason Tracy, and every week I interview business leaders to share their stories, life lessons, failures, and advice with you. Welcome to Coffee and Grit. What is up? What is up? Welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Grit, and I have got Dr. Bannister in the studio today, and I'm super excited because this guy, and this is going to be, there's so many cool stories. I sat, it's probably been a month or so ago now that we sat in the office, and you just told me story after story, and I was like, you have to be in on the show. And so what I find really cool is this guy frees people from their prisons of that they get trapped into their beliefs as far as prescription drugs. And yet in his history, he actually kept people in the prison. So I love how that is tied together. So Dr. Aaron Bannister, welcome to the studio.
Oh, thanks.
Absolutely, man. No, it's how's it going?
Well, it's going well. Yeah, it's a great day. Helping people out, getting them out of pain. Gotta love it.
How does that feel, like being able to so tell me about that, I guess, when people come into you, what are they like at the beginning?
Well, typically, people are coming in for pain relief, and then we kind of steer them toward the idea of what's causing it. Typical chiropractic, most people understand that you twist your back out of shape and, it hurts. So somebody will kind of twist it back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we kind of try and look a little deeper to see what the cause is and see if we can resolve some things through not just, physical means, but through nutrition, through psychological means. So sometimes we refer out for counseling, or we got a Reiki lady we refer out to. So, we look at it through what they call the 3 T's: thoughts, traumas, and toxins. That's the basis of all chiropractic philosophy, right? So emotional, chemical, physical.
And and we've had chiropractors on the show, and whatnot, but in our conversation, I was like, I didn't even know this existed. And you talked about, and I've practiced saying this word, so I hope I don't screw it up, but applied kinesiology.
Nailed it.
Nice. My wife was like, you better practice that out loud. I'm like, you're right. Cause I was like trying to tell her, I'm like, he's applied.
Yep. So basically, chiropractic's a specialty, and then you can do subset specialties. And one of those is applied kinesiology. And so what we do is we utilize muscle testing to determine what's going on with the body. So it's basically using the patient to figure out what's wrong with the patient. So it doesn't require a lot of extra outside testing. And because of that, we can find odd things for patients. We can find allergens. We can find problems with, previous emotional traumas, right? So those are some of the things we can kind of look through just by doing the muscle testing. So for instance, let's say you came in, you got some mid-back pain, right? So we can contact the mid-back. We can use a indicator muscles, typically deltoids. We'll have the patient kind of hold their arm out to their side, and we'll see if we get strength or not when we contact that segment. And if we've got a weakness, then we can start figuring out, whether this is a physical, chemical, emotional problem, and then start addressing it appropriately. So let's say, again, we're mid-back, so maybe like a T8. So T8 is usually representative of liver. So we could have problems cholesterol-wise, or blood sugar-wise, or hormone-wise. So those are some of the chemical things we want to look at. Emotionally, the liver tends to be related to anger issues, so unresolved anger. For instance, I had a patient in a while back, and she came in with swelling around her liver, right? So it was swollen. You could palpate it. It hurt, right? And she went through a symptom list, and I'm like, well, this is a liver issue. She's like, yeah, I know. I'm like, well, this is down to unresolved anger. She's like, I know. She was a Reiki professional.
Right. I'm like, how did she know that?
And she had been working on it for a while. So we had to go through her story, right? And not to get into too many details, but the gist of it was She thought this was down to, anger over some infidelity issues. That wasn't quite it. It was actually down to the fact that she had to keep moving around to kind of, resolve her life situations, and she couldn't really put any roots down. And once we kind of figured out the source, we had her go home and do an emotional release technique. So this is just something I teach my patients how to do this. And so I get a text from her, and she's like, "Is it normal to get a little nauseous?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's possible. We might be releasing some toxins into the system." And then she texts me back an hour later, "Is it normal to throw up?" Well, I would think it would go the other way, but I guess it's possible. So I didn't see her for a couple days. And during that time, apparently she had been very, very sick, just vomiting. And when she came back, all the swelling was gone, the pain was gone. So it resolved, just from taking care of that emotional component.
Wow. And it made her like physically sick for a couple of days, just releasing those toxins.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this can happen with any emotional deficit. So, you can go to traditional Chinese medicine, they talk about this kind of thing. So basically what it does is it affects the connective tissue, right? So there's fascia or connective tissue that kind of binds everything together, and that stuff will hold an emotional memory. So they've actually redesignated its own organ system. So you've heard of someone like dying of a broken heart, right? Well, this is how it happens, right? Basically, your heart is representative of joy, okay? And so if your joy is stolen from you, you have a loved one die or something, then that connective tissue restricts around your heart, right?
Like suffocates it almost.
Exactly.
Wow. It makes so much sense, and it's one of those things that, like, I think a lot of people, what kind of reaction do you get when by some people when you start talking about how like our emotions can tie into our illnesses?
I think people instinctively know it, you know what I mean, and then it becomes oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most people get it, pretty easily, especially when you explain the heartbreak portion. People understand that. And then you can go into other things like, people who have a lot of thyroid problems. Some people, it's because they have unresolved issues where they're not telling their truth, right? They're not speaking what's real, right? Some people have a lot of fear issues, right? So fear is usually like a kidney bladder issue. So they can have a lot of UTIs, right? So those are the kind of physiological things you can get from just the emotional component.
So how did you get down this path? How did you end up getting into this?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story, but
I love those.
All right, I'll give you my origin story. How about that? All right, so the gist of it is coming out of high school, like most teenagers, I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. My girlfriend at the time she was kind of into the medical side of things, and so that's kind of where I started. So I jumped into a pre-med program, and I was out at Western, and I just didn't like it. It just didn't fit. And so moved back home after my freshman year, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I'm like, well, try some business admin stuff, right? And didn't like that. And then it was time to pay the bills, right? So my aunt and uncle worked for the corrections department, right? So I joined up and went through the academy and all that, and hired in at Detroit. So I worked down at Mound Road for about a year and a half, and I transferred up to Lapeer. And you and I had kind of talked about this a little bit, so I'll tell this story. So, at Lapeer, we had Dr. Kevorkian, right? He was in one of the units. And so Dr. Jack, he got a lot of fan mail. He had a lot of legal work to do and things. And so one day he was working on his Bunky's typewriter. And so he was level 2. Level 2s, they get a key to get in and out whenever they need to because there's a common bathroom, right? So So he was supposed to secure his cell after he left, and he did not. And when he came back, the typewriter was gone, right? So he comes running up to the podium, and he's like, Bannister, Bannister, somebody stole my bunky's typewriter. And I'm like, okay. He's like, well, aren't you going to call somebody? I'm like, no. I'm like, I can write it in the logbook, but this is prison. That's what happens.
This is not a secure area. I don't know if you know this, if you looked around at the bars, right. But this is not a secure area.
Yeah. So later on, Jack comes up and he's like, one of the porters, that's the guy's clean, right? So he's like, one of the porters said that, it's in this garbage can around the base. He's like, can I go check? I'm like, I don't care. So he runs around and he pulls the lid off and pulls the bag out and he hoists this typewriter over his head. Now, you got to realize he had already been through his hunger strike, so he's rail thin, right? So he kind of looked like Mr. Burns, that episode where he puts his hand over the bowling thing and it looks like a piece of chicken, right? So he hoists this thing over his arms. His little arms are just shaking like crazy, and he does a quick lap around the base. And I fell on my chair. I was laughing so hard. So
it was when you were telling me that he's like trying to hoist his typewriter, and I can picture Mr. Burns and Jack Kevorkian at the same time.
Yeah, it was, the job was mostly boring, but you got some stories out of it, So anyway, while I was working at the prison, I didn't really like the job all that much, and my buddy, his girlfriend was a massage therapist, and she liked what she did, and I was like, all right, I'll give that a shot. So Lapeer had that's where I'm from. They had a massage school there called the Health Enrichment Center. So I joined up there and loved it. Stayed there for 3 years, did some advanced massage stuff there. And then once I finished up, they had an articulation program with Siena Heights, so I could get a bachelor's. Essentially, I've got a bachelor's in science with what they call a massage therapy emphasis. So I basically have a bachelor's of massage. And I finished out my prereqs for Palmer at LCC. So the way I got on that path is working at the prison again. There was this nurse there, and she invited me along to see this nutritional chiropractor down in Novi, Dr. Tent. Most people in Michigan know Dr. Tent if they're into the natural stuff. And so I went and saw this guy it was at the Hilton. And he was talking, and he had a couple hundred people in this crowd, and he's talking about, natural health. And I was like, man, this makes so much sense. And, I was dealing with a lot of kidney stones at the time, and I went to his office, and, this was after going through a couple of rounds of, the old smash the stone thing, So, yeah. God. Yeah, the lithotripsy. Yeah, it was rough. And so I think I had like 5 stones in a year. Yeah, it was not good. And my urologist, he didn't really have any answers for me. They're just like, oh, don't drink orange juice, don't eat chocolate. And I was like, that doesn't sound like a good plan.
Just throwing a dart at the dartboard and hoping something works.
Pretty much, that's what they're doing. And so I went and saw Dr. Tent, and actually I saw his associate because he was pretty busy. But basically, they put me on I think maybe 3 supplements, and that was it. And I never had another problem. And I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. And so I got on that same track as Dr. Tent. I went to Palmer, did a lot of nutrition stuff. When I was at Palmer, I started doing the applied kinesiology courses. And then once I finished up, I did certification in whole food nutrition. So that's kind of how I got where I'm at right now.
Before we get back at it, a quick shout out for our sponsor, Playbook Builder, powered by AI. This show has always been about giving the resources and the tools to small business owners in order to grow and scale your businesses successfully. And so I'm so excited to partner with a company that does just that. If you listened and heard any of our guests, you've heard talking about building process, developing and training, building culture, are all such important pieces in order to building a great company. Well, Playbook Builder, powered by AI, has come along and revolutionized the game on how you can do that for your team and people. Whether you're onboarding new people, training and developing, continued training and developing, you're looking to scale your business or eventually sell, or most importantly, you're looking to build a legacy as a visionary. Playbook Builder powered by AI is able to solve those problems for you. For me as a consultant, I've been able to plug in, and it's so amazing for what I do for clients. I can now leave a legacy. And so, for example, I'm next week training a new hire for a company, and I've been able to build out the next month of her training program using Playbook Builder powered by AI. The cool thing about the AI, what does that do? What's the hardest part of building out a process? Taking this step by step and making it easy to learn. What the AI piece does is you can actually type in what process it is, whether you want to onboard, if you want to onboard a new employee, type in onboard a new employee and what type of industry you're in, and the AI will put together a foundation for you to build out your playbook. It is absolutely incredible. But don't take my word for it. Head on over to playbookbuilder.com, and these guys have set it up to where you can take this for a test run with no obligations. Plug in what kind of playbook you want to build. If it's a sales training playbook, for example, plug that in the description. And in the description, you can also put in what kind of industry you're in, and then hit generate, and it will generate a playbook for you. Impress from there, and you can take a 30-day free trial of the playbook system altogether. First off, I love how like you're going through this job, and outside of a few good stories at the prison, it's like it could be looked at as like a wasted time. But while you're there, you have a connection that leads you to Dr. Tent.
That's right. Yeah. I'm not a big, I don't think anything's a waste.
Yeah.
I think everything in your life puts you where you're supposed to be.
I'm a huge believer of that.
Right.
It all happens for a reason if we're paying attention.
That's right. Yeah. Every time.
Every time. And then to go back, it's like I have commonalities between my guests, and a lot of times we're everybody that's on here is solving a problem that they've went through. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at it, it's like it's not good enough to not have the answer, just to be guessing, to be throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that something there like resonates so you can find out what your problem is. And how much do you have to go through? How much time? I've talked to people that have been not known what is going on in their life for years. Yeah. And they're still trying to test and trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, I'm just, I don't know. I love the idea of just find the reason, that's kind of what's fun about this job. It's just like every day I get to play a detective.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, why is that doing that? Because the thing is, you go to school and they give you these textbooked, like this is what this is supposed to be, and this is what this is supposed to look like. And then you see real people and you're like, well, that doesn't look like that. Nothing works the way it's supposed to in school, so you just got to wing it. You just got to figure it out. And so that's what's kind of fun. You have people with, I have patients that have oddly shaped legs. One bone is shorter than the other one. You have to figure out how to help them. You have patients that have, all sorts of surgical issues, and you got to work around that stuff. I've got a patient where her organs are on the wrong side. That's just how she was born, so they're kind of swapped around. You got to deal with that.
Because we're all individually unique.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it.
That's so. So what's that part? Like, what is something that stumped you, or like not maybe like it's taken a minute to figure out?
Oh, geez. Sometimes it takes a minute to figure things out. So I had a patient that we knew that there was something creating this inflammatory issue in her joints, and we knew it was dietary, but it took a really long time to figure it out because it was something so unique and specific to her. So the gist of it is I went through and had her do a bunch of dietary journals, and we would go through and we would test everything out. And then one day we kind of hit on this turkey sandwich, right? I'm like, all right, let's tear this turkey sandwich apart. I'm like, all right. And we went through the bread, the meat, whatever she put on it. And it comes down to the mustard flags, right? So she goes weak. So I started going through the ingredients. We actually looked up the ingredients of the mustard and I go through it one by one, and paprika hits. She's crazy weak. And she's like, paprika? I put paprika on everything. I'm like, who does that?
Shit on everything.
She loved paprika. And so that was creating an inflammatory response for her, and that's pretty typical for people. So the trouble with a lot of food issues is that we tend to eat the same thing over and over and over. And if you have any sort of gut issues, then you're basically absorbing proteins, larger proteins than you should be. And those proteins end up getting tagged, right, as something foreign. And now you've developed an allergy, right? And that tends to happen to us with our favorite stuff because we tend to eat that stuff a lot.
Over and over again.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
usually a big bummer for a lot of people when they go in like, but I love that. Yeah, that's what's ruining you.
We know. We can see it in your knees.
Yeah, you got it.
That's so. You told me another story about how you kind of ended up working with a dog and how you you work with animals quite a bit.
Yeah. So the animal thing, I just do it as a favor for patients because I like animals, dogs especially. So I've worked on a fair few dogs. Let's see. I started with my mom's dog. So basically, the dog, he's limping around, and the dog was an a-hole. I mean, I didn't like the dog, but I like dogs in general, but he was kind of a dink. But anyway, he was limping around, and so my mom had taken him to the vet, and the vet was like, well, he must have stepped on something. $200, please. And that was it. And I'm like, give me the dog. So I adjust the dog, and the dog, kind of nipped at me, and then he took off. And so he's fine. And then, I don't know, probably a year or two later, she's taking the dog in because the dog's got, it's gross, but the dog had like bloody diarrhea. Ugh, gross. So she took the dog to the vet again. Then again, it's like, here's some drugs, $200, please. And it didn't fix the dog. I'm like, okay, give the dog some chlorophyll. And that's just a standard process supplement. So she gave the dog some chlorophyll. The dog's fine, like immediately. So, now at this point, like she's comes to me first for a lot of things now, which is nice, But once I worked on her dog, and I worked on a couple other dogs, and then I had a patient that, she asked me if I would work on her dog. I'm like, okay. So she brings me in this greyhound, right? And it's like 2 years old, but it can't stand up, it can't walk. It's kind of shaking, and his eyes are kind of rolling around her head, and his tongue's hanging out, all this kind of stuff, right? And I'm like, oh boy, what'd you bring me? Well, the dog, they had taken her to the vet, and she, they did an MRI and a spinal tap and all this stuff, and they told them it couldn't be spinal related, which, any chiropractor will tell you that MRIs, and that does not equate the neurological component.
Yeah. It would make sense.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna see if I can fix this dog. So I got all these people watching me because I'm out in the waiting room. Right?
Pressure's on.
Right. Exactly. This better work. So I go up and I adjust the dog's neck, and it didn't hold, and I adjusted it again. It didn't hold. And the third time I got just the right angle on this thing. And the dog jumps up, runs out the door, poops all over the lawn, right? And, and the owners are all like crying. So they thought they were going to have to put her down. She's only 2. And so I'm watching the dog, and it's like every two or three steps, it couldn't figure out where it wanted to put its paw. Like it was going down its wrist, basically, right? And so I asked him, like, what else is going on with your dog? Like, well, she's been, peeing a lot and drinking a lot of water. And I'm like, well, if you add in you can't feel your feet, you're diabetic. I'm like, your vet just missed this. I'm like, so we put her on a couple supplements, and, dog was fine. Right. So next week, dog runs up, she's licking me, and this is really cool. So, and then she, I'm watching her run.
It's so cool because the dog realizes that you gave her her second lease in life,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we put her on something for her blood sugar, and then we put her on something for her kidneys, help them clear out. And she was fine. And then she, she's a greyhound, so she wants to run, and she hadn't been walking right in so long that when she get to run, and like her butt is like kind of beside her front legs, so that was kind of funny. But so we had to fix that. But other than that, she was fine. So yeah, dogs are fun because they they respond pretty quickly. And, like people, you can, is it the placebo effect, whatever.
Dogs aren't faking it.
Dogs can't fake it, same with babies, it either worked or it didn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, so dogs are fun. I had a dog, let's see, I had one that's, he had a tumor. Yeah, that was an interesting one. So, for those of you who are dog owners out there, something you might want to know. I'm not a fan of chickpeas in dog food. I find that it causes a lot of liver problems for dogs. So just throwing that out there. This particular dog, he had a big old tumor on his stomach. And so we tested it out, and I'm like, okay, this is a dietary thing. And so we tested it. I'm like, okay, what do you feed him for snacks? He's like, oh, milk bones. I'm like, you can't give this dog milk bones anymore. So they took the milk bones out. Tumor went away in like 2 weeks, gone, right? So then, I saw him maybe a few weeks later, and I'm like, how's the dog doing? Well, the tumor's back. I'm like, you been feeding him milk donuts? Well, my dad keeps feeding him milk donuts. He doesn't listen. And so I'm like, you gotta tell your dad to quit feeding the dog milk bones, right? And so right in the middle of the appointment, he picks up the phone. He's like, Dad, no more milk bones. It was kind of funny. But yeah, dogs are fun. Dogs, babies, they're fun.
So we're talking about like vets, but something that really resonated and talking about like the doctor, like $200, here's your prescription pills, you know, and at the beginning talking about that prison that people are in America, United States, is like being addicted to prescription pills, and it just really being that here, just take something to surface fix the problem, right? And I think that's just outside of even just ailments. Like we all just want that surface fix, but
well, it's because you're conditioned to, right? Because I think I can't remember what the stat was, but it's somewhere around like by the time you're 18, you got 100,000 hours of indoctrination into Western medicine, right? And you got 0 hours into wellness care, right? Actually taking care of yourself, and that's crazy. It's crazy. It's hard to undo that mindset. It takes time, right? Because it's not like you walk into being in a wellness mindset. It takes years to kind of transform that. So. Dr. Tent, when I went and saw his first seminar, he's talking about how, I don't have insurance because I don't see medical doctors. And I'm like, what? What? I'm like, this guy's nuts. And here I am, 20 something odd years later. And I'm like, I don't carry medical insurance because I don't see medical doctors. I just don't use pharmaceuticals, period.
That's awesome.
And it's wild to say, but that's the way it is.
I love that, and I specifically wanted to talk about it because it's one of those things that people probably can't even fathom that. Right. So like when my grandma passed away, it's been 4 years ago now, and I'll never forget it. But like when the coroner came and the family's there in the corner, asked my mom, is she on any medications? And my mom pulled out like a dresser drawer, and the whole entire dresser drawer was filled with these medications that my grandma took daily. Right. And that's just, wow.
Yeah, it's crazy because the problem with a lot of the pharmaceutical stuff is you take one thing for an ailment, and then you got to take a couple other things to deal with that out. Yeah, to deal with the problems that come from taking that medication. People I think they manipulate the language on purpose because they call them side effects, but they're ailments. You've created an ailment, right? Yeah. Yeah. So.
That's just like the switch of the word, but that's exactly what it's doing. Right. You're creating a new problem.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like that. You watch these commercials and they go through all the things that this thing is going to cause, and they're like, yeah, but those are side effects. Yeah, but one of those is death. That's a problem.
I like me and my son, every time those commercials come on, this is my concept for what the commercials should have to look like. So like when the guy's out on the boat canoeing and just rowing his boat and like the birds are chirping, and then when they go through the side effects, like the person should have to go through all of those things, like hemorrhaging out of the ears and mouth. Right. Like, it's like all of a sudden he's like, oh shit, he's like bleeding and like all this stuff is going on like as the side effects, like just to give people the perception of like, this is what you're creating. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I tell some of my patients this story, when I was a kid, real little, I had a couple great grandmas still around, and
My one great grandma was, she lived a long life. She mid-90s when she passed, and but the problem is, she went that pharmaceutical route, and by the time she got to where she was, she didn't know anybody, and she was in a home, and it was not a great place to be. And then my other great grandma, she lived to be 104, and she saw the chiropractor every week. She didn't do any medications, and my mom swears that she'd still be around if she hadn't broke her hip. She was just, she's a stout lady because she improved her health rather than trying to chase symptoms. And so that's kind of what I preach is try and improve your health.
It's probably designed that way, but it's just so crazy that we're not doing the things to do the preventative stuff. Right. We're doing the reactive stuff.
Exactly.
And when we're solving surface problems and just reacting.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I just I try and teach people some things that'll help them maintain their health. I think it's crazy to just kind of throw a drug at everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How often do you meet? You have somebody come in as a patient that then all of a sudden their whole family is coming in.
It's pretty frequent, especially if you get, like a kiddo in, and then you fix the kiddo, and then next thing you know, mom and dad and grandpa and grandma are coming in. Adults, it's a little different because, sometimes they have family members that just don't buy into it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yep. So they kind of, it is what it is. But yeah, like if you get like a little one in and you're able to fix that kiddo, then everybody's on board.
It's like the testament.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll give you some baby stories. So I had this little guy in, and he's only a couple months old, and so babies, they got to eat, sleep, and poop. That's it.
Only responsibility. Get one job.
That's it. If they can do those three things, they're in pretty good shape. So this little guy, he can't poop, right? So his little belly is distended, and he's in a lot of pain. So he's screaming, right? And so we go through and do our testing and figure out that this is a chemical sensitivity. So I asked the mom, what type of detergent are you using? She was like, we use Tide. I'm like, you can't use Tide with babies. You got to use Dreft. And her mom was in there, and she's like, I told you use Dreft. I was laughing so hard. And so they went home, they washed everything, and he's starting to get better. But he's still constipated. And we opened up some valves to allow him to go and stuff. And he's getting better and better over the weeks. And then they come in, and I asked her, how's he doing? Well, he's only getting constipated in the afternoon now. Like, that's weird. So he's sitting there. He's cool as a cucumber. And then Dad walks in. Picks him up. He starts screaming, just like he did on that first day. I'm like, that's interesting. Like, what time does he get home from work? Oh, afternoon. I'm like, you wear any cologne? No. You got any smelly deodorant? Old Spice. Like, that would qualify. So I'm like, let's do an experiment. Why don't you quit the Old Spice and see how he does? So they come back next time. The kid's just happy as a clam.
Wow.
So, I mean, you got to think about like how big that is, right?
It's huge.
So, I mean, not just because the kid can poop, but now you got a dad, his first time dad, right? They were concerned that he wasn't going to be able to have kids. And so this is kind of like a miracle baby, right? And now you got a miracle baby that can't bond with dad. Right. And now all of a sudden he can. Kind of neat.
Yeah, I got the chills. That's amazing. Because this is like you're thinking your son just doesn't like you.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've seen that, with a few kids, and it's really just that they don't like smells. You don't want to be around with a lot of perfume and cologne. This kid, like, they figured out that when they take him to see grandma, he'd bind up again. Well, they just started
very sensitive to the smells.
Yeah. So they toss a blanket between him and grandma, and he's fine, right? Just like a little block, right? Yeah, that's
because you can't tell grandma to not smell like grandma.
Exactly. Yeah. Grandma dumps perfume.
Need you to curb your smell.
Yeah. I saw that one. I think the first time I saw it, this little girl I was working on, and it was kind of similar situation, a lot of indigestion and stuff. And, I was wearing cologne around her, and, when I get close to her, she'd blow up. And then once we figured that out, quit wearing the cologne around her, she's fine.
Yeah.
So it's kind of neat.
That's so neat. That's just like process of elimination. And
yeah. And then, let's see, another baby story we had, this was probably 6 years ago. So this little girl comes in, same story, screaming, can't poop. This time we figure out it's a food allergy, right? So for her, it came down to corn. If you're not aware, most formula is garbage. It just is. And the first ingredient in baby formula, 9 times out of 10, is corn syrup solids, right? It's sugar. So with her, we put her on goat's milk formula, right? And she was fine. Okay. So I didn't see them for years, right? And they came back through probably 6-8 months ago. And this time it was her older brother, right? So I think he's 9. And so he comes in, and he is having these fevers, these intermittent fevers, and he's throwing up all the time. And his guts are so inflamed, they're pushing up into his diaphragm and like pressing up against his lungs, basically. And this kid is not doing good. So we're sitting there, and the dad's telling me the story, and I look at him, I'm like, I bet you it's corn, because he's got the same gut as his sister. He got it from his mom. So we test him out. Sure enough,
same thing.
Yeah, took him off, and the inflammation all died down. They took him to see I don't know, it was a GI guy, I think, and so he's like, well, that can't be all it is, because he wants to cut him open, and I'm like, so
he's like, that can't be more. Oh, let me go in there and explore.
Right. So they fire him, and they go back, I think a month later to go see because the kid's fine by that point. He's like totally normal, and so they go back to see their people at U of M. And dad's like, I was ready to fight him. They were gonna push back on this. So he's like, yeah, we took him off of corn. He's fine. And they're like, okay, have a good one. And that was that.
$200.
$200,
please. It's got to circle back around.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see.
How cool is it to go from like watching them from being a baby to like growing up?
That's fun. That's a lot of fun, because when I started out, I was working for a guy down in Ann Arbor, and a few of the folks that I worked on down there kind of followed me up to my practice in Brighton. And so I've seen some kiddos go from I think I started working on them when they were in fourth, 5th grade, somewhere in there. And now they're grown, and one of them's in the military. And
so crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of neat.
It's so neat. So I know just from like being in sales and retail, I was in the cellular industry, so I'd sell kids their first phones. Yeah. And then you see them as like the 25-year-old guy, and it's like, that's so cool. It's just like cool. It was always cool to see that kind of progression. I can only imagine like literally working on them, helping, healing, being a part of that journey.
Yeah, it's cool. It's very cool. I'm not quite old enough to get the grandkids yet, but I'm sure that's coming.
It'll happen at some point.
Yeah.
What is like just something that hold on, I just lost my question.
I have a question if you don't have one, Jason, because I'm listening to this stuff. Sorry, I'm listening to this.
No, I love it.
How are you Sherlock Holmesing all of this stuff? Like, what made you even think to ask about that? I guess that would be my question.
Which part? You talking about like the kiddos?
Yeah, like any of it. Like, oh yeah, well, what deodorant are you wearing? like
yeah, I know. And that's what, even the first time we were talking together, I'm like, how is he like, what? It's
I was
Columbo.
Just thinking, I've been watching Columbo. Like, I've been watching old Columbo. I'm like, who's this guy?
Yeah, you come across things as you work, and then you see patterns develop sometimes. Sometimes it's just straight instinct. Sometimes it's just I don't know how to describe it. The body just tells you what to do. And, it's hard to explain sometimes because you find some weird stuff. I had a lady in, she had, so in your body, you have what are called microsystems, right? So most people know what reflexology is. So that's a good example. So if you take the feet and you kind of stack them together, you got your head at the top and your feet at the bottom and your spine in the middle. And if you look at these charts, they're all a little different because they're copyrighted, but that's the gist of it. And so you have microsystems all over the place. You got them on the bridge of your nose. You got them in your teeth. You got them, on all the long bones in your body. They're everywhere. And they're a complete representation of the whole body, right? So when we're talking about teeth, they can cause muscle dysfunction if you have any problems with your teeth, okay? So I had this lady, and she was getting a little... she was getting a little down because her back pain wasn't resolving the way she wanted it to. So I'm like, all right, let's do some extra testing. And so I traced this thing all the way up to her teeth. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? So we tested, two of her teeth are testing dysfunctional, and they both tied into abdominals. And so your abdominal muscles are your core, right? And so they kind of stabilize your lumbar spine, right? Because from your rib cage down, there, you just have muscle, right? Yeah. So if they're dysfunctional, then obviously you're going to have some back pain because it's going to pull on it. So we adjusted her teeth. Yeah, we take that little instrument and just adjust her teeth, and her back pain went away, right? Instantly. And so we got into it a little bit, and we're talking about her, she would wear a bite guard at night. Okay. And so I'm like, well, you should probably go get that thing adjusted, go see your dentist. So she went to make the appointment with the dentist and spoke to the receptionist and mentioned to her something she had not mentioned to me, which is that she was wearing a retainer and the mouth guard at the same time. And so she was creating the dysfunction in her teeth every time she went to bed, which is how she woke up with her back pain.
Wow.
So once we figured that out, now she's good, right?
So it's really like the average person does not know that your teeth will tie into your abdomen. Most people aren't going to know that. And so that knowledge that you have, like you kind of can deductive reason. Yeah.
So that's the thing you got to realize, once you get deep into this stuff, is anything can cause anything, so you can't treat anything separate in the body.
Yeah. Well, and that's because anything can cause anything. Like, go to Grant's question. It's like, there's so many possibilities. How do you boil it down? I mean, I know there's a couple of things where you're like, try this or try this, but it seems like you're nailing it every time.
Well, so like I said, it goes back to the muscle testing. So I've got my own techniques that I developed, and basically it's okay, is it above here, is it below here? And then we just trace it up or trace it down until we find the thing. And then once you find the spot, then you kind of start with the most obvious stuff, depending on what piece of anatomy you're dealing with, and work your way backward from there. I had a guy in that's, he was having essentially stroke symptoms, but it wasn't a stroke. And so, you could watch his, his musculature in his face would kind of droop and stuff. And it only seemed to happen when he climbed up this ladder. And so his doc couldn't figure this out, his neurologist couldn't figure this out. And so he comes in, and it happens right in front of me. Like, I'm like, oh, cool, we can test this now and figure this out, right? So I traced it all the way down to his foot. And so I adjusted this bone in his foot, and you watch his face just go right back up again. I was like, oh, that's neat. So
neat.
So there's something in the body they call the kinetic chain, right? So if you wreck, say, your ankle, then that's going to go up to the opposite knee, which will go to the opposite hip, and it'll just kind of ping pong all the way up. And so if you have this one particular bone out in your foot, then that'll wreck this top bone in your neck, okay? And that top bone in your neck will affect your brainstem. Your brainstem has all those fun little cranial nerves that control the musculature in your face, right? So what was happening is this bone would go out on his foot, and it would race up that kinetic chain, pop his atlas out, and then right? And so then he goes to his doc and he's like, yeah, he adjusted it. My face went back. He's like, oh, that's a coincidence. And so he came back and told me that. And I was like, yep, that's chiropractic. 100 years of coincidence.
Isn't that so crazy?
Yeah.
Like, it's just, yeah, just coincidence, 100 years of it.
Yeah, it gets frustrating sometimes, but, whatever. You got to let your ego go and just let the results speak for themselves,
Well, that's exactly it. And they're the people that get it, and they come to you, right? And
you got it. Yep.
And you're not going to sell other people that are like not going to believe it.
Yeah, that's it.
But it's science.
Yeah, chiropractic's like gravity. It works whether you believe in it or not.
Well, it's science, And I loved the yard signs. I was like, we believe in science and these kind of things. And it's like, to me, like, science is like ever changing.
The problem with this idea, this rigid that you can have a double blind placebo trial apply to everything in life is just nonsense. It's just nonsense because, when you're talking about, even something as simple as like a vitamin, the vitamins are so complex that they actually have to strip them away and find like a piece of that vitamin in order to do any scientific testing on, because they're just too complex to get this is the cause.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's just nonsense to me because, again, it goes back to our original point that, everybody's unique. It's a unique individual, right? And so if you treat everybody with this carbon copy mentality, you're going to miss a lot of stuff,
Yep.
That's insane to me.
It's insane. It's insane. Like, so my early, and it's really funny. My childhood doctor was prosecuted for fraud, served like prison time and stuff like this. But I remember being a kid and like every time we'd go, they'd like order chest X-rays, and like I remember specifically being a kid and like, should my mom be the one that's diagnosing me? Like, right. She'd be like, I think he has this, and the doctor would ask a few questions, like, yeah, I think you're right, and let's do a chest X-ray, and like $500 and probably $200 $200 please. And it's like everybody got a chest X-ray when we were there.
Yeah, ours was we'd always get injected with an antibiotic every single time. Every time.
For what?
Time for a shot. We're going to the doctor. Time for a shot. Okay.
And you just have blind trust because they're a doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what's crazy about it is, that there's good doctors out there. And there's bad doctors, right? And you gotta be able to see through that stuff. I remember this. I had this nurse come in to see me one time, and nurses are a mixed bag because some of them believe so hard into the pharmaceutical realm that you look through their stuff and they're on any possible med they can be on.
Yeah.
Right? And then some of them are hardcore in the opposite direction where they're really into the natural stuff and they actually don't buy into a lot of what they're actually doing on a day-to-day. So it's a very weird mix. But I had this nurse come in one time and she's like, don't take any offense, but I'm kind of skeptical about what you do. And I'm like, that's okay. I'm skeptical about what you do.
That's awesome. What'd you say?
She's like, oh, okay.
Fair enough.
But we got her working, so one for me.
Is she still skeptical?
I haven't seen her in a minute, but we got her back problem fixed up, so she's doing good.
That is so awesome. So going through becoming a chiropractor, you mentioned you worked in somebody else's office out in Ann Arbor.
Mm-hmm.
What was the decision to open up your own practice versus working for somebody else?
Well, so basically, when you're an associate doc, honestly, you don't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because the guy who owns the practice makes the money, and you just kind of work for him.
Yep.
So that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
If you want to, do well, you got to go out on your own.
Yeah.
Plus, his technique was a lot different than what I do. So, when I was working there, I had to do more of the manual type adjusting, and I do a lot of low force adjusting. So that's what I prefer. I had a few instances where I was injured by a few different chiropractors. And I jump back on that horse, but a lot of people won't. they get injured once and they're like, that's it. This is a bunch of crap and I'm not doing it again.
Yeah.
And that's sad because, there's somebody that could have helped them, whereas I don't think people really do the same thing when it comes to like
a doctor,
the medical world.
No.
Right. Which
I wonder if people actually really even like their doctor a lot of times. Like, you hear people like, I don't like my doctor, but they keep going back to him over and over again. Not even like going and trying another doctor. Like they go to the same one.
Yeah. I don't like him. I'm going back.
I'm going back.
$200.
$200, please. That's good. This is not the title of the episode, but it'd be really funny. Like, right. $200, please.
Yeah, one of the big things that kind of turned me away from the medical world, because like I said, I was pre-med and I had gone to see my medical doc, and I had typical cold kind of thing, and I was like, I need some antibiotics, and he's like, well, it's not really going to help. It's a virus, so it's not going to do anything. I'm like, well, what would you give your kids? I knew he was I think he's a Pakistani guy, and I figured, he maybe knew some home remedy stuff, right? And he's like, I can't tell you that. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? He's like, well, I'm in a managed practice, and I start giving out, home remedies, they'll fire me. I'm like, that's messed up. You're supposed to be my doctor. You're supposed to help me, right? And he's
but what you're gonna do for your kids, you can't
right?
come in.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like a lot of times, you'll see people, especially like in the oncology world, they won't treat their family members the same way they'll treat everybody else, and that's kind of why I like the chiropractic world, is because the way I treat you is the same way I treat my mom, and it's the same way I treat myself. It's like, I walk the walk.
It's so huge.
Yeah.
Walking the walk, because there's so many people that just talk.
Exactly. Yeah. That's to me, if you're not gonna, if you're not gonna treat your loved ones the same way that you treat your patients, you're not living genuinely. I don't know.
That's the way I was like, from a sales standpoint, I would always like, I'm sitting, I was selling cell phones, right? And the old lady comes in that doesn't get the cell phone. And so many people would just be impatient with her, or like try to get her out the door and see losing money. And I would always put it in my mind, like thinking about if that was my grandma.
Exactly.
Because if I can have that empathy, I think about like, if this is my grandma walking in, how would I want to treat her? How would I want her to feel when she came into the store? And like when you can really humanize people like that and put like, this is like my mom, this is like my dad, this is like my sister or my brother or whatever, and you can look at that, like you're going to have a lot more patience and really be in more position to empower that person than if you're just looking at some old lady that's taking your time up.
Yeah, you got it. That's exactly it. Yeah, you got to treat people the same way you treat your family, or better.
Yeah.
and you'll have customers or patients, in my case, for life.
For life.
Yeah.
Like, so it's one of those things when you think about that, because like, I mean, I sold cell phones, and people would be amazed all the time. Like my brother would come into the store and he'd be like, you have literally people like waiting for you. Like people are waiting for you. I'm like, yeah, they'll wait here for like an hour or so. Like, what do you mean? It's like you sell them cell phones. But it's more than that. I listen to them.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I see them and I listen to them. And so like, it's more than that. I think the first time I'm like, why are people coming in here? Like, and just like telling me, like, it's like a therapy session, you know, like they kind of tell you their life story, and it's like, I don't even know what I did, but they're thanking me by the end. And,
yeah, that's that. And yeah, like if you're good at your job, you're going to wear a lot of hats, So, I act like a counselor to people. People talk to me, they tell me their issues, and I do what I can to help them with them, and just like, this, one of the same reasons I joined up with SiriusNet, right, is so I can help them with other things and point them to people that can help them with stuff,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Got that helper mindset.
It's so huge. And that's just, that's a whole other thing where, it's just flip the perspectives, because a lot of people, it's like, how do I refer people out? How do I, but if you think about like, I can serve somebody else at a higher level by connecting people. Do you know who Brian Sorowick is?
I don't think so.
Brian's an awesome guy. He owns a company called Strawsome. He actually has an IT company, and then he has a company called Strawsome. They do like glass straws.
Okay.
And I had a guest, Corey, that was on to Corey Thompson. She was on a couple of months ago. She owns Refilleries. And so I was talking to Brian one day when Steve came to town. We went out to lunch, and Brian was there, and Brian and Steve were talking. And I heard Brian say something about refiller. His straws are in this refillery, and I'm like, wait a minute, like your straws are in refilleries? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I just had Corey. She has like 3 of them, and she's like, oh my God, that'd be a great connection. Like, just make that connection. I've made that connection in. So Corey has had this event that because she's actually now consulting other people opening up refilleries. And so she has this big retreat or big event for people all across the country that have refilleries.
Cool.
Brian and her connected, hit it off really well. Brian comes in, we play basketball together. So Saturday morning he comes in and he's like, oh my God, me and Corey connected so well. I'm actually they're going to be her main sponsor for her event. So she found a main sponsor for her event, and then he is now going to be the main sponsor, and she's going to introduce him to all these people, all these refilleries across the country that he has potential relationships and potential clients. It's that one connection. Mm-hmm. Are both of them happy? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
You think about that impact just by just shooting out a message and saying you two need to meet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
It's so incredible. Mm-hmm. Like what you can do in that impact. And so being able to take your network with you, how do you implement that?
Oh, it's easy. You just listen to people. And so, if I got a patient that's, having trouble with their hearing aids, I got a guy. It's just that easy, I had a problem with my basement. My insurance company, they don't want to pay me out. I got a guy.
Yeah.
And you just listen, and then that stuff always pops in.
And I'm glad the answer was listen, because that's the other thing. I didn't want to just move on to the SiriusNet thing, but I didn't want to just skip that either. But like I talked about the commonalities that my guests have, and listening is a huge one. You have to listen, or you're going to miss the clues.
You got it. Yep. Whenever we do intake at the office, we do a very intensive intake because we want to find all the details, because you don't know what small thing that happened 30 years ago might be impacting them right now, so I go through it all. Okay. You had a hernia in 1974. Okay. Where was it at? It was right here, but that was 50 years ago. So
yeah,
you don't know that adhesions in that area aren't creating hip flexor dysfunction, which is giving you back pain right now. Right. So we got to look at all of it.
Well, and I talk about it all the time, again, being difference makers. And that's what I feel like people on the show, that's what they have in that common. They're the difference makers. But there are so many people that don't listen, and that there's listening, but there's 2 different kinds of listen. There's listen to diagnose or rebuttal, or to, and then there's listening to understand. Mm-hmm. And so like if you're listening to reply, if you're, you're listening to like give you think you know what it is. And so you're like listening just for your clues that you're listening for, you're going to miss that so many times. But there's so many doctors and people, like just professions in general, that sales, that just listen to try to get their clues that they need versus listening to really understand.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. So you want to look for, just like you said, the clues. And once you find the clues, you put them together, and then you can start coming up with a plan to help people.
What keeps you curious?
Oh, what keeps me curious? Oh boy. The thing is, I always learn. I learn something new from my patients all the time. And that's what fascinates me about this job is, they teach me more than. More than anything else, because you like I said, you walk out of school and you get this idea that okay, well, everybody's going to fall into these categories, and they don't. And then you get to talking to people, and you find out, okay, well, I used to do this, and now I can't do this, and I'm like, okay, well, let's find the thing that allows you to get back to being able to do that thing. And it's like Dr. Palmer talked about the big idea, basically. This story about this guy, and he has a slip, right? And that slip is a small thing. And then it hurts his back, and that pain is a small thing. And, and then it basically snowballs, and, now this guy can't work, and, can't take care of his family, and that's a big thing, right? And then he talks about the subluxation. Like, the subluxation is a small thing. The adjustment's a small thing, but the relief, right, that this guy gets is a big thing to that man, right?
It goes back to the dad that was wearing the deodorant.
Exactly.
Right? Like wearing the Old Spice is just a little thing.
Just a little thing.
That's a big thing to not be able to bond with your kid.
You got it.
And to not know why. To think it's something with you. Right. Not that it's just your freaking deodorant.
Yeah. Yeah. It's these big ideas, right? The way you can, spread this, I don't know, it's just change in this world, just by doing these little things. It's cool.
I can see how much it lights you up.
Yeah, I love it.
And Dr. Bannister, it's been so awesome.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate you coming in and sharing these stories.
Of course.
It's just awesome to see again. You get so much passion and excitement out of really changing people's lives.
I love it.
It's so cool because it's like starting at the journey when starting from the beginning of the story, and it's like went to this job, didn't like it, went to this job, and it's like, and that's hope for so many people. Like but you can find your thing.
Right. Yeah, I tell people just keep traveling your path, because the world, the universe, or God, or whatever you want to call that, has a purpose for you, right? So you keep walking that path, you'll find it.
And I'd say we talked about the clues a second ago, but the clues are there. You never know where you're going to find it. You were at the prison thinking you're like at this job that you don't like,
right?
And then you get taken to an event that changes your life. It awakens to what is possible.
Exactly.
Because the other thing is, like, when we're younger, we have no idea what's possible.
Right.
We're told really most of our lives that we can do these 5 or 6 things. We can be a police officer, a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, but even just a doctor, it doesn't go into what all kinds of different doctors you could be.
Sure.
Like there's these just few things that you can be, or a professional athlete, and there are so many things out there.
Yeah.
People can find their passion and just really be lit up.
That's right.
All right, so man, we were out of the studio, literally walking out, and you're about to go back to the office, and you're like, I didn't want to share my favorite story because I'm gonna cry, and I'm like, we're going back in, we're going back in. So anybody that listens to Coffee and Grit knows that's the story that I want to hear, and so
Sure.
I'm holding you hostage and making you tell your emotional story. So tell me about your favorite story.
All right, I'm gonna try and get through this. Okay, so. All right. So basically, when I got into chiropractic school, I was mainly there to kind of learn the nutrition stuff. That's what I was really interested in, because the chiropractic, it was nice and all, but that wasn't really what helped me, right? And so I got into I think it was 7th try, and you get into working with the public, right? And so there was this little girl that came in to see us, and she was 6 years old, right? And so she came to see us. She was referred by her occupational therapist because she was getting migraines, not normal for a 6-year-old. So we go into her history, and she has something called cyclic vomiting syndrome. So she would get upset, and she would start throwing up for 8 hours at a time, and she wouldn't be able to stop. And because of this, she couldn't go to school. She didn't have any, sleepovers or any of the normal stuff that kids would have, and she's just miserable. And she'd been poked and prodded by everybody in town, and nobody could figure out how to help her. And she's just on all these drugs and scared to death of docs. So we would have to take her clinic jackets off and stuff, and she's just a scared little thing. And so we did an x-ray and found out she had a 25-degree left scoliosis. So it's going toward her heart. So that's not normal. And so we had to do MRI to make sure that it was safe to adjust her, because sometimes that's a deformity with the brain and things. So we were clear to adjust her, and the adjustment was not this cracking stuff. It wasn't this popping stuff. It was literally hold the atlas, 2 fingers on the atlas, right? And so that's the first bone in the neck. And so they held that there for 10, 15 minutes. And we do that 3 days a week. Okay. And within 2 weeks, her headaches are gone. Right. And then, so a month later, her vomiting's gone. Right. So now, now she's getting back to being a normal kid again. Right. 6 months later, scoliosis is gone. Right. From this. Okay. That's, that's the power of the body. I was like, I want to do that.